Hello, everybody. Welcome to Economics with the Honorable David M. Walker. I'm Nick Pellevitt. I'll be your host for today's presentation. And today we're going to look at some very interesting topics. One of them is the Doge report. We're going to see what, we're going to try to update everybody what's going on in the Department of Government Efficiency, which is a new initiative to basically stem the tide of government spending. The other thing we mentioned on our network is that Donald Trump will play with two different tools that he has. One is the executive orders, which we've already predicted and he's already used. The other one we predicted he was going to use is tariffs. And he's already done his first little interesting play with tariffs, and that revolved around Colombia. And that happened very recently. What happened was they were transporting over individuals from Colombia that apparently some of them had problems in terms of criminal records. And so he put them on a C-130 and off they go. Well, Colombia wanted them transported on nice private jets. Okay. And the Donald would have none of it. So what he said is, fine, what we'll do is we'll install 25% tariffs on all goods coming in from Colombia and then up them to 50%. And you should have heard the backlash. Oh, your coffee's going to cost more, all this other garbage. And then what happened was Colombia folded, seriously. So now it looks like the immigration issue is going to be taken care of, and they're going to send off the people to Colombia. I found that to be quite interesting to see how media picked that up immediately, and they started slamming Donald without the full answer. And I was kind of like, dude, you got to wait and see how this plays out. It did not play out in their favor, at least what I call the left or mainstream media. With that, we do have David Walker here today. He's going to join us, former Comptroller General of the United States, and has a lot to say about the Department of Government Efficiency. But you've been harping on this longer than anyone else I know, David. I mean, for decades. And now finally, I might do something. And I'm just going like, here you got a guy who's been harping on this issue for decades. And the only thing I saw is you have Vivek and you have Elon that just recently came to the table and no one else. So what are they going to do? As they would say in Who's Mr. Wonderful, what are you going to do? And my question is, when it comes to Doge, what are they going to do? Anyway, we'll turn the floor over to you.
Well, Nick, thank you very much. It's good to be with you. Sorry I couldn't be with you last week, but in any event, well, first, Doge, as I think they pronounce it, the Department of Government Efficiency, is much needed and long overdue, and I sure hope it's successful. I will, however, tell you that I've got some concerns that I hope will be addressed, and let me articulate what those are. First, President Trump, Elon Musk, Vivek Ramaswamy, and others talked about Doge having a very broad mandate. That mandate would be to government-wide, and it would be look for opportunities to improve the organization and operations of the federal government, broadly defined. And clearly that's needed. As you may know, I headed up an initiative back several years ago called the Government Transformation Initiative, which presumably had a similar purpose as what Doge originally was advertised to do. And that is, the federal government's grown too big, promised too much, subsidized too many, lost control of the budget, undercut states' rights, doesn't have a plan, and doesn't manage itself, both resources and regulatory actions, to try to achieve defined outcome-based results. I mean, we still don't have key national indicators to understand how are we doing, how do we compare to others, are we making progress or not. And so I was very hopeful that Doge was basically going to be able to focus on those issues. But when the executive order got issued, it was much more narrow. It was focused primarily on information systems issues. And believe me, there's plenty of opportunity for economy, efficiency, and effectiveness improvements with regard to information security. The Defense Department alone has thousands of legacy non-integrated information systems Uh, in addition to that, we've seen problems where payments are being made to dead people or made to incarcerated people because there's not information sharing going on between various departments and agencies. For example, the Social Security Administration has the death records, but those aren't being shared in a timely manner with other, federal agencies that are, are processing, tax returns or making payments for a range of federal government programs. And so there's an opportunity there, but it's a small subset of what ultimately has to be done. The Doge is also, contrary to initial advertising, is going to be within government, not outside of government. It's going to assume the staff of a prior digital operation within the office of the White House. That means that the people who are working on Doge, will be within government rather than outside of government, and yet they're still an advisory group making recommendations. They can't implement anything. At the same point in time, it also means that Elon Musk is going to have to figure out what his status is going to be, given the government's rules with regard to conflicts and ethics and things of that nature. It does mean, by being in the White House complex, that Doge won't be subject to FOIA, the Freedom of Information Act, but they won't be exempt from GAO audits and reviews. And I fully expect that the minority in Congress will ask GAO to do audits and reviews of what Doge is doing. And as you probably know, that Vivek has already left Doge. Presumably, he's going to be running for governor of Ohio. In addition to that, just within the last couple of 2-3 days, the counsel for Doge, William McGinty, has announced that he's going to be leaving Doge as well. And so, it's very much up in the air as to, what its final mission is going to be. I hope it's expanded, and who's going to be working with Elon Musk to try to be able to bring this ship into port successfully. But they say they're going to have an administrator who will report to the chief of staff at the White House, but they haven't named that administrator yet. They've got a lot of volunteers working, but now they're saying they're going to hire some full-time employees to work on the effort. So I think the bottom line is it's a work in progress, and hopefully we're going to get some more clarity within the next 2 to 3 weeks.
Okay, it's situation normal. Everything's screwed up in Washington, D.C. That's what we used to say when we looked at the tax code. It's all normal. It's all screwed up. But we're not screwed up here in Pod TV. We do have our panelists that are going to join us to discuss what's going on with Doge, which I saw Vivek was gone. I don't see an administrator. I don't see a plan. I did see that apparently they suspended all these payments to foreign countries for 90 days.
They've suspended hiring. They've suspended hiring, and they've suspended additional foreign aid for 90 days.
Yeah, except for Egypt and Israel, and I'm not sure why those two got exempt. We're going to bring in Kim. We're bringing Rick Rosser. The reason I'm not sure why they got exempt, I believe Egypt joined BRICS. And if they join BRICS, why would you give them aid? I believe Israel is using money to slaughter people in Gaza. Why would you give them aid? So I had some questions on why those two countries were exempt from, they're still able to receive aid. So, there's still some questions. Of course, the press doesn't bring that out at all. But I do think there's some questions on why those two countries were exempt and all the other countries got exempt. I did see what he did on the tariffs to Colombia when they shipped the people over. And I thought that was kind of cute because what happens is Colombia didn't want them because they wanted to be in a private jet. And I'm going like, you cannot be serious. They were treated like prisoners. Well, that's because some of them were. And then Trump goes, okay, 25% tariffs. And all of a sudden Colombia folded. I found that to be quite.
And as you know, Nick, Trump uses tariffs as a negotiation tool. This is a prima facie evidence of him doing that. and with positive effect, no question. And
Yeah,
I,
I thought, yeah.
Do you think, David, that that will backfire? That the two countries that border us, that really don't like Trump anymore or at all, probably never did. Do you think it's going to backfire eventually? Because, 25% tariff, Trump doesn't have to pay for it. We do. The consumers recover that cost. But what's stopping them once we have no more food? Our supply and demand is gone because, I hate saying it, don't make me prejudiced, but we got rid of the people who put the food on our table. We bit the hand that fed us. So are we going to bleed to death from that? I mean, I'm growing my own gardens now. I've added another greenhouse just so I can grow year round, but that's going to be healthier if this bad thing doesn't happen. But will that kick us in the face? Will we be cutting off our face despite our toe doing this? Because quite honestly, they're sick of us. And they're going to just finally say, you know what? You don't have food. And you know what? Nobody wants to get, and they're going to be united. They're going to start, Mexico and Canada surround us, and they're going to unite against us, and it's going to be the Alamo. It's, and
Kim,
that backfire.
Kim, we're self-sufficient on food. We don't need them for food. Okay?
We're not self-sufficient. Kellogg's, yeah, maybe. Yeah,
we
McDonald's.
We can be self-sufficient on food. This country has enough to be self-sufficient. In fact, we export a lot more. We may import some, okay, but we can be self-sufficient on food. Secondly, I think this is just another example of where Trump is using the threat of tariffs. If he doesn't get cooperation on certain things, like, for example, in the case of Mexico, he's using the threat of tariffs to get them to try to help with regard to border security and to be able to take back, the criminal illegal immigrants that we want to send back. In the case of Canada, we've got a big, balance of payments deficit with Canada, and he wants to somehow take some steps to try to rectify that. There's a secondary issue with regard to borders.
Wait, we owe Mexico money?
No, there's balance of payments deficit. Okay, in other words, well, pardon me. I said Canada. We're importing more than we're exporting to Canada. Okay, that's the issue, not Mexico. Mexico is more of a border security issue. Although there are things going on in Mexico. For example, the Chinese have a lot of investments in Mexico that they're trying to be able to do things in Mexico that we wouldn't allow them to do directly. So they're trying to do things indirectly that we wouldn't allow them to do directly. Another example is fentanyl and a bunch of other drugs that are coming through. A lot of that comes from China, and it's processed. It's processed in Mexico and then shipped in to the United States. So again, I come back to my personal view is you only want to use tariffs on a targeted basis, and in some cases in a temporary manner where there is a unfair practice. There's an unfair practice that's going on. Trump clearly uses tariffs as a negotiation leverage tool to try to achieve much broader ends other than economic. And as evidenced by the Colombia situation, it worked. Is it always going to work? No. But, it's going to be facts and circumstances. As I said a while ago, things are going to be very different under this administration, whether you like it or not. Fasten your seatbelt and get your popcorn ready. Rick, what you got, buddy?
People are
From your own popcorn. I don't believe, David, that we're self-sufficient. So
people are liking it.
I love you, David, but I don't think we are. And let's get Trump
not with coffee.
us.
We're not with coffee, as an example. Okay, go ahead, Rick.
Not with coffee,
Right,
right?
so generally, a president's approval is the highest during his first few weeks during the honeymoon period. Trump kind of messed that up back in 2017 by fighting with the media over how many people came to his inaugural. This time around, he's just doing a lot of stuff. And according to this is day 8 of his presidency. And there are already some approval surveys out, and they're ranking him the highest he's ever been. He's above water. he's getting approval of more than 50% compared to disapproval of like 39%. And we'll see how this shakes out. But for the time being, he's having a good honeymoon period.
Well,
That's because he's making moves. But go on, David.
and I'll tell you why I think that's the case. All right. Think about what all's happened in the 7 days that we've had already. Okay. He's issued over 100 executive orders, including on issues that he campaigned on that the American people are concerned about. He's traveled to North Carolina because of the tragedy that happened there, the natural disaster. He's traveled to Los Angeles. He's traveled to Vegas, all in the first week. He's given many speeches. He's given a number of press availabilities. And so the level of activity that he's had in the first week is really unprecedented. I've never seen that much. And for the most part, it's consistent with what he campaigned on, including the January 6th issue, if you will. Now, he has made some mistakes. One of the big mistakes that he made, which is in my forte, is he fired 17 inspectors general, which is clearly against the law because the law was modified in 2022 to say that you have to give at least 30 days notice to the Congress if you want to remove an inspector general, and you have to be able to provide cause for why you want to remove them. In this particular case, he fired 17 and just said he wanted to start over, which is really obviously not cause. And so we'll see what happens. I imagine that a lot of them will probably end up showing up for work today since he didn't provide the 30-day notice. And some of the ones that he fired are people that he actually appointed. That doesn't mean they're doing a good job. And it doesn't mean that, the people that he didn't appoint aren't doing a good job. But that was an unforced error. He could have sent a letter to the Congress saying, it's my intention in 30 days to be able to dismiss these people because I want to start over. I'm not happy with the results that we're getting, whatever it might be. So that was an unforced error. And we'll see how it ends up playing out.
So he fired without cause. I guess it's not
Right.
a just cause state or position. But so he fired without cause, no leave of no pay leave, absence or anything, just you're fired.
Well, but we'll see whether they left, right? I mean, my understanding is some of those people are still going to show up to work because the way that he did it, at least, is not consistent with the law.
Well, he's doing a lot of things in my mind that's not consistent to a law to humanity. But, what about okay, let's go to money, because that's what we really talk about here in the economy and the impact. Mm-hmm. He's laid off all the DEI people and has given them paid leave of absence for 60 days. What is the impact and cost to our country for that? And I know, he's opened up jobs for a lot of people by shipping the migrants out. But and especially if you're a criminal, I'm sure there's criminal jobs out there. But what impact is it on our economy when you give that many people leave of pay? How does that affect our bleeding in government?
Kim, it's my understanding that he has dismissed everybody who's involved in DEI offices. He's canceled DEI training and other related initiatives. He has given leave. Is 60 days the right number? I'm not sure what the right number is, but he has given paid leave. That obviously doesn't save us any money. But once they are no longer affiliated with the government, that will save money. Canceling a lot of these training programs, which were done, frankly, by outside contractors, in most cases, not government workers, saves money. Doge has alleged, and again, I haven't audited these numbers. Doge has alleged that a couple $100 million will be saved after all of these things are right sized and after the related programs are discontinued. I don't know that number is right or not.
what's the ripple effect in the economy because I did take some classes on this years ago. When you start laying off big numbers of people and the ripple effect, for every so many people you lay off, that impacts a job in your economy if you don't have a replacement job. One would think, a smart business person would come in and go, you know what, let's just reassign your positions and you can help us do something else. But we're paying them to stay at home for 60 days. And hopefully they're looking for jobs. But then after that, I would believe that they would get a severance package. Am I correct?
Not necessarily. No.
So you're just going to fire 1 million people?
People, civil servants aren't automatically entitled to a severance package. No. And the way that civil servants do have rights. You cannot discriminate, but when you eliminate offices, that's not discriminatory. I mean, one of the things that I did when I was Comptroller General.
Good to know.
I had to right size GAO. And one of the things that I did was that I eliminated offices. All right. And one of the reasons you have to do it that way is because if you want to do it based upon performance, the performance appraisal systems in the government are horrible. Okay. They don't give you enough information to be able to make a meaningful difference between who's doing a great job and who shouldn't be there. And that's something that's got to change. If you want to have a merit-based system, you've got to modernize your performance appraisal system to be able to make meaningful distinctions between levels of performance. At least my experience has been, in most cases in the government, that does not exist. And therefore, that's why you'll see people looking at offices and units to get rid of physical offices, to get rid of physical units, body that's in those units. In some cases, they may have an opportunity to get redeployed. In my case at GAO, some did have an opportunity to get redeployed, but it wasn't guaranteed. It wasn't automatic because it was based upon our strategic plan and what our needs were to serve the Congress. And if we had a need that wasn't going to be met without transferring somebody, we did it. But that was a small subset of everybody involved, rather than giving everybody the automatic right to transfer whether we had a need or not.
And that's good. Thank you for sharing that information, because sometimes people need to hear what really does go on in the government offices. Just one more aspect to all of that. What is the impact to an economy, the ripple effect, when you lay off that many people and you let go of that many people with no jobs of their same income level to support recovering their employment?
Well, first, it's facts and circumstances. We have a lot more job openings than we have people looking for jobs right now. Okay. And so it really depends upon the individuals. As far as the amount of money involved, it's highly immaterial to the economy. I mean, if you're talking, let's say you're talking $200 to $300 million, which is what's been asserted. That seems high to me, but that's what's been asserted. You compare that to a $28 or $29 trillion economy, it doesn't have much of an impact. It does on the individuals involved, no question. Okay. But it doesn't on the overall economy.
But there will be no money circulating the economy when they're gone, because I have witnessed this in Research Triangle Park when massive layoffs came in and there was nothing. People said, oh, there's jobs somewhere else. There's jobs somewhere else. I mean, I've been a part of programs. I helped work with victims of layoffs. I call them victims, but and I know you guys say we're cutting the fat and we're trimming this and we're trimming that, but I've seen the impact. Research Triangle Park became a ghost town and it never recovered from those massive layoffs. The people never, you know what? I can bring people on because I still run into them. The people have never recovered. I think they all suffer from PTSD from that, because they all went to college, spent years investing in a career that, and the economy suffered horribly in this area because of that. not as bad as when the furniture industry shut down, but it did suffer. And so I'm just curious. You say there's jobs. I mean, I'm just curious, what is the real impact to an economy when you cut like that?
Well, it's facts and circumstances. In your case, you're talking about a significant impact in one local area. Okay.
Right.
These
We're the United States. We're one local. Well, we used to be one united, but
these people are all over the country. They're not just in one local area, if you will. But Rick, what you got?
Let's talk about the long-term effects of Trump's presidency on the economy, which is Republicans generally over the past 100 years let the economy run hot. They knock back regulations. They let the economy go crazy, and then that often leads to a crash or a recession. And Trump is like Republicans on steroids. Are we going to look at something like that where we're going to have 2 years of a red hot economy and then stuff comes crashing down?
Well, here's my concern. Well, first, I think there's absolutely no question that Trump is going to try to deregulate. Okay. And there's a lot of opportunity to do that. Secondly, I think he's going to try to devolve certain functions from the federal government to state and local government. He's talked about that a little bit in connection with FEMA, but there are plenty of other areas, including education, that's done. I think he's going to try to extend his tax cuts. He's going to try to end up cutting government programs. All of those things in the short term will help. But here's what I'm concerned about. Interest rates on the borrowing rate for the 10-year Treasury has gone up about 100 basis points or more since he's been elected. In addition to that, gold has gone up materially since he's been elected. To me, those are signals saying that while we might get some short-term gain as a result of some of these actions, that there's increasing concern within the markets that we're not dealing with our fiscal cancer. We're not dealing with the fact that we're spending a lot more money than we're taking in. We're running record deficits. We're facing mounting debt burdens. Interest cost is now the second largest expense in the budget, for which you get nothing. And it's on track to be the largest expense in the budget if we don't end up changing course. So I see a number of things that can help in the short term, but we're not treating the cancer. We've got to treat the cancer if we want to be able to maintain economic growth, if we want to be able to make sure that our future will be better than our past.
Okay, I think Mark has
something. We always talk about certain holidays and certain memorials to certain people. Anne Frank, this is a significant anniversary month of some of her diaries. I read one of her sections of her diary in this morning's show. Just remember what happened during Anne Frank, what all seemed so, right. And we have to do this, pushed, with some prejudice, forethought. Be careful, because history does repeat itself.
Mark, what'd you have? You had your hand up.
Yeah, I had a couple of quick questions for you, David, because actually we kind of alluded to it earlier and everything, but we do have some people on this network that are involved in that space, the DEI space, and all along those lines, because actually Sharon Campbell and I think Maxine do work in that space and everything. So because I think that we would all agree that we need to have some diversity within our workforces and everything. So what advice would you give to folks that are in that space? And I was also wondering your thoughts about the Tuskegee video, because apparently, of course, they weren't going to allow it to be shown, and now they are saying that is part of the history. And I know you've got some ties to the military and everything, so I just wondering your take on the Tuskegee Airmen video, because at first they were saying that wasn't even going to be allowed to be shown, but I think they kind of walked back on that and everything. But
the Tuskegee thing is an extremely positive example of inclusion, diversity and inclusion, and they did an outstanding job. I mean, to me, that's something that we ought to be giving more exposure to rather than less exposure. Secondly, let me go based on my experience, because what I'm finding is a lot of the things that we did at GAO when we made major transformational change, we were way ahead of our time. Okay. And a lot of the things that we did are transferable and scalable to other parts of government. And frankly, I was hoping that Doge would do that, and we'll see. Maybe they will. I'll give you an example. I created an Office of Opportunity and Inclusiveness. Okay. And the purpose of the Office of Opportunity and Inclusiveness was to try to take affirmative steps to achieve a diverse and inclusive workforce. But merit was a key part of it. All right. So there were never any quotas or whatever else, but we wanted to take affirmative steps to try to be able to get qualified people that would give us a more diverse workforce, if you will. And so it was equal opportunity, not equal result. The problem with diversity, equity, inclusion is equity. To many people said you got to have the equal result. You can't guarantee equal result. Okay, so we had that Office of Opportunity Inclusiveness. We also had an Employee Advisory Council. All right, and that Employee Advisory Council, one of the things that I did was I gave a seat for the gay and lesbian community. I gave them a seat on the council so that their voice could be heard. And that was part of the efforts of, for opportunity and inclusiveness. Okay. But I think what you're seeing is there's a desire on behalf of this administration to emphasize merit to a much greater extent than may or may not have been emphasized in the past. And sometimes the pendulum swings too far. And I think, frankly, that's what happened with DEI. And swinging back, and hopefully we'll achieve some kind of equilibrium that makes sense, because we do need to try to take affirmative steps to try to include an inclusive, workforce, but we can't discard merit, and we don't want to have a quota system.
Yeah, Jacoby.
I think the issue, though, when speaking about DEI, one, I think you had mentioned that equity was confused by the layman, thinking that it was an equal outcome. That's not what equity is, but they're scrapping the program partially due to a confusion on people not understanding that, which is a problem. Also, another thing is merit has always been a part. The problem became with DEI is that it just became another term to berate, besmirch, and disqualify people, and saying that an individual, just because they are brown or a woman or whatever, weren't qualified, and the only reason that they were hired was because they were trying to include them, which again is a problem. This is why this is one major issue with the pushback against DEI that Trump is doing. He didn't even look at any of the actual qualifications of anybody. He just said anybody that was associated with DEI. And again, that just established that DEI was connected to either you being a woman or you being a person of color. On top of that, all those programs, and this is where I guess the question and the extreme concern comes into play, because it does affect a business that I'm in the midst of creating in the first place. Those grant programs, for example, connected to DEI. Honestly, also just another nugget of that we never really associated with DEI is DEI helped white women more than it helped any other race or culture. Same thing with affirmative action. It did help white women more so than it helped anybody. That's not a bad thing, but it's just the way that it worked out. But we associate it with minorities. But with DEI, with the removal of these individuals associated with DEI, many of them work with grant programs that associate themselves with DEI or actually helping at-risk youth in inner cities. Now, what the Trump administration has done by releasing and firing these individuals, DEI also works with special needs as well. It is taking away those grant programs and those assistances with that, or anything associated with that. So now special needs individuals like the Autism Society are going to lose a ton of money due to the fact that they actually reach for those grants. Same thing with inner city youth. So how do you feel that the administration can cover this huge gap that is just now created by releasing these individuals associated with it?
Well, as I said, I think sometimes what ends up happening is the pendulum swings too far. Okay. And I think there was a perception that the pendulum had swung too far with regard to DEI. Then the step was taken to say, let's get rid of all of that. I think what's going to end up having to happen is we're going to have to see when the dust settles to try to be able to separate the wheat from the chaff. And to the extent that there are segments of society that are truly in need, that the federal government needs to play a role, I think you'll have to see that the government will step up and fill that need. But it's similar. It's a different subject, but it's similar. It's like the inspectors general. Okay, maybe some of the inspectors general weren't doing a good job, and maybe they were, maybe they should, be dismissed for cause. But to get rid of all 17 without any notice, without any, analysis of who was doing a good job and who wasn't doing a good job. I'm not trying to say that's the same as DEI, but what I'm saying is, you're taking a sweeping action without, getting into depth with regard to the individual facts and circumstances and the merits on a case-by-case basis. Rick?
So today, Trump's going to fire about 2/3 of 1% of the military. He's signing an executive order today to get rid of all trans troops, which is 15,000 troops out of 2 million some troops.
Okay, I'm just going to comment briefly on his executive orders, and we have to go to another little problem in the law, his birthright citizenship. He signed an executive order to eliminate it. Unfortunately, it's ingrained in the 14th Amendment. So when he signs executive orders, it doesn't necessarily mean these executive orders are legal. However, I want to bring everybody back to this famous case, Worcester versus Georgia. This is a Supreme Court case in 1832, which you should all be familiar with. If you're not, Counselor, I'll brief you. This involved the Trail of Tears, where Andrew Jackson took all the Cherokees and ripped them out of Georgia and moved them to Oklahoma. The Supreme Court of the United States declared it to be unconstitutional. And Andrew Jackson told the Supreme Court, great, you made your order, now enforce it. And of course, the Supreme Court didn't do anything. So what Donald is doing is he's going, I'm going to put these executive orders out. And in terms of the law, well, we'll let it go wherever it goes. And so it doesn't necessarily mean his executive orders are legal. It just means those are his executive orders. But he does have some.
Well, but in fairness, if you recall, there were several attempts by the past administration to cancel student loans. And the Supreme Court told them, you can't do that. It's unconstitutional. And yet they still tried to do it, another one or two times after that. I mean, part of the issue is what's the enforcement, right? I mean, you got to have the enforcement. Let's talk about that issue right now. If you know the way the Constitution reads, it says, and subject to the jurisdiction thereof. That's off the top of my head, okay? Because, I know a fair amount about the Constitution. And so the real question is, what does that mean? I think ultimately what's going to happen on birthright citizenship is it's going to go to the Supreme Court. And the Supreme Court is going to have to decide the issue. Now, my personal view is for somebody to automatically receive citizenship if they're born in the United States, at least one of their parents should be a citizen. That's my personal view, okay? Because if you don't do that, then you're creating a perverse incentive, for people to come here to have children, even though neither parent's a citizen, and then they apply for chain migration, where the parents then want to become citizens, if you will. Look, our immigration system is totally messed up. We need major immigration reform. Coming back to something that Kim said, we need to separate between temporary work permits, which we need, no question, okay, to be in the agriculture area and also like for, summer, taking care of, grass and things of that nature, all right, or areas where Americans won't work. We need, and then we need to separate those type of situations from green card status, all right, and then citizenship. To get citizenship, you need to take the legal road, and you need to do something above and beyond just being here, okay? And so I think this issue that he took is designed to try to get it to the Supreme Court, and ultimately the Supreme Court is gonna have to decide it.
I think
You know
it's
what?
wishful
Something
thinking.
I've learned in history is that the Crooked Kings always, you see these in the movies too, always change the laws so they can kill their wives and get rid of them and get a new wife, take people's estates, steal their money. We saw Hitler do this. But, I think that you do not appreciate who or what you had until it's gone.
Yeah.
And I have a feeling you're really going to know what you lost after this week. And David, you're right. They do come over on temporary. But where does our food come from if we don't have them?
Yeah,
Well, look, there's an absolute positive need to allow for seasonal workers in the agricultural area. We have it, but you've got to farm it, right? I mean, you've got to harvest it, right? Absolutely, positively, and we clearly ought to be able to allow for that, all right? But that's different than, the people want to come here illegally and stay here, and then whether or not they're dependent upon social welfare systems, okay? Because we're not exactly in great financial shape.
No, we're not.
Yeah, right.
No, I agree, and I've always said we don't need to be bringing foreign students over here and giving them Social Security checks and paying for their education while we're having to suffer paying for our own kids' education that costs $200,000. I agree with you, David. I think there needs to be a reform all the way across the board and checks put in place to make sure we do it ethically, humane, and remember, without certain people doing work, we will not have what we need. So you need to be humane when you do these things.
One last thing.
I agree with getting rid of the criminals, though. I have no problem with that. The problem is they're getting rid of everyone. And I have a problem with that. And America, folks, okay.
Well, first,
I just wanted to say, don't come to America. We are not the greatest place to be. We don't need you. We don't want you. Trump has shown that. And the tariffs are going to raise the prices so high, you're not going to be able to afford to even farm here.
I want
You're not going to be able to eat.
I want to go to Mark and Jacoby, but before I do, look, one of the things we need to do as a country, we have no plan. We need among other things, a human capital strategy to be able to say, what type of people do we need to meet our needs and to be competitive in the world? All right. And among other things, that means comprehensive immigration reform. Among other things, that means changing our K through 12 education system. Among other things, that means doing more with regard to the trades as well as normal college educations. It means many, many different things. Okay. We have no plan, but I will tell you this: while we need comprehensive immigration reform, it will not happen until you have border security. Once you have border security, then you can move on to comprehensive immigration reform. And I just hope we do that sooner rather than later. Mark and then Jacoby.
Yeah, just really quickly along those same lines, I was just wondering your take on private security versus public security, because that was one of the other executive orders that came up and everything. Because actually, I think that recently Trump said that Fauci has made a lot of money, so he can afford his own private security company, and he'll even recommend some private security companies for him because he is pulling back some security forces off of the various people that were in the public eye. So I just wanted your take on that as one that used to be, and I guess still technically are still in the public eye.
Well, I think there were certain individuals who had been threatened historically by Iran because of their involvement with eliminating Soleimani. And the question is, how long do you provide that security protection for? I think obviously, if you're in office, there is a need for security. If you're out of office, depending upon what the nature of your position was, for example, former presidents get security, for their life. In this case, I think it was Pompeo. There may be a few other people who have been given security for a period of time. And the question is, how long do you do it? They clearly don't need it for life. Okay. They've had it for several years already. They're not in a position that they can affect policy today. And we've got limited resources. I mean,
Fauci was one of the guys who had protection pulled, and he's received credible death threats and continues to.
Fauci's steadily receiving.
He also got a full pardon too. Yeah. Yeah.
No, but Fauci's receiving death threats from people who are not trying to arrest him, like Trump. Yeah. Fauci's receiving death threats from the MAGA crowd that are trying to kill him. Pompeo and John Bolton also had theirs removed, and they have death threats coming from Iran last year. So what Trump did to remove the security detail was more so out of spite than it was out of any thought process of, do they need security detail? That was just more of an explanation to justify what he did. But no, he pulled all that stuff out of spite. And he is legitimately going to have blood on his hands if they end up dead, because, again, Fauci's steadily receiving death threats. Pompeo steadily receiving death threats from Iran. And that was just last year where it was all publicized. Same thing with Pompeo or Bolton. And so though that's just a horrible situation. But I wanted to get back to the idea.
Hold on. There's a common denominator here, Toby. The common denominator on this issue, as well as several others that we've talked about, okay, is the need to look in depth and to make decisions on a facts and circumstances basis rather than across the board. Okay. I mean, that's the common denominator here. And to be able to explain why this person, why not that person, et cetera, et cetera.
And I agree. He's not looking into cases. He's just doing across the board, shown by DEI, shown by the immigration situation as well, which is what I wanted to get back to in terms of the birthright citizenship, because even though you bring up that court case that was decided by the Supreme Court, Nick, so was Roe versus Wade. Who removed that? That was Donald Trump. We all thought that was a settled debate, but no, it ended up going to the Supreme Court, which leaned towards Donald Trump, which if this goes to the Supreme Court, it also does that. But not even thinking about the executive order and if that's going to be in the case or not, that is another signaling to his base, because his base has already started putting together militias to go after illegal immigrants that they perceive are illegal immigrants. ICE has already gone and started raids, and those raids have already picked up American citizens based on the color of their skin, which is horrible, which is why a stop and frisk law, a show me your papers act on a national scale or any scale is a bad thing. So I agree, Dave. He's not putting any forethought to these actions. It sounds like he's taking the ideas that he hears online and putting those into his executive orders and just riding with them, because they are causing, for example, even in Texas, there was a report that 20 some odd % of farm workers didn't show up. There was a report that in California, there were 40 some odd farm workers didn't show up. When those become numbers like that across the board, across the nation, that's going to affect our food supply. That's going to affect our construction workers. That's going to affect every facet of our economy.
Which is why you need comprehensive reform.
Completely agree.
But understand this. Under current law today, it's illegal to hire an illegal.
But we're not going after the employers.
No, I understand that. No, I understand that. And that all comes back to enforcement, right? I mean, who's going to enforce it, right?
And if we go to the enforcement piece real quick, remember, and this is where I get agitated with like when we were talking about the misconceptions, where we're not educating our society or our populace anymore. We're just, hey, they confuse us, let's run away from it, with the misconception that, one, they're coming across the border when majority of people who are on that immigration are people who have overstayed their visas, which means they have to go back through the litigation process, and they're not having the opportunity because the courts are backed up and they don't have that legal arena to do so. But we're turning around and saying people that are coming are criminals and crooks. Well, but we're not realizing these raids are going into businesses and not going into jails. So if they're criminals and crooks, how come you're going into businesses where people are working? Because if you're a criminal or crook, you're not clocking in.
Hey, Jacoby, I love those.
David, Mark, there's some good news here. I just found some good news.
No, I was good.
Okay,
Did you get that good news? Hold on a second.
It's going to keep lawyers like me busy for a long time. Okay, go on.
Hold on a second, Nick. I was going to add to that good news and everything, because one of the things that I think Jacoby is aware of that actually kind of scared me, I don't know if Kim heard about it as well, because it actually took place here, is that in part of that enforcement, then you got people that are masquerading as enforcement, because there is a very popular Latin grocery store. It's called Compare here and everything. And Compare, they literally had a van that was going around masquerading as ICE. So they were going to a popular store to the Latin American community. And of course, that put a lot of angst on a number of people that are Latin American and everything, because, you know, they are feeling like that is a kind of like a militia that is out there that is going to round them up, even though it was not an official ICE van and everything. And I don't think that they have arrested the person yet that was masquerading, but they did say that they were masquerading in that sense to pretend as if they were.
I don't think it's funny, and I hope they arrest them and somebody files a lawsuit against them. I think we need to be focused on doing the right things today, because this is. But I think that prank is bad, very bad.
Impersonating a federal law enforcement officer is a crime.
Right.
They should be arrested and they should be prosecuted.
Yeah.
Agreed.
I don't agree on that, but the issue is because of the signaling from Trump. Again, executive order against birthright citizenship, this show me your papers and everything. He's giving the okay to these militias, which he's bringing the Proud Boys and all these other militias to the White House. So now he's got his own army doing these own things, which is what Mark is talking about, because it's not really a prank. It's what's happening. These individuals are being hunted now based on what he's saying and what he's doing. And that's
it goes back to, we do need a better education system, David, that people in this country do need to take some basic law courses so they understand executive orders are not the law. It's just like when we studied
their policy.
Their policy, right. Their policy, they are not the law. And when we studied tax law, the first thing they said, IRS revenue rulings are not the law. It's the IRS's litigation position. These executive orders are not the law. This is Donald Trump and the executive's position or policy on it. So until the Supreme Court says, because I did read that, I thought it was very interesting, and I read their arguments. They have some arguments. Until the Supreme Court says that executive order will stand, that executive order is not the law. It's the litigation position of this administration. But again, we need to have better education so people know that these executive orders that are being spouted about don't necessarily mean that they are legal. They're just executive orders.
Nick, but it's not just the litigation position of the administration. It is the policy position of the administration. And the president and the president has the right to give instructions as the CEO of the government, as the commander in chief of the military, to say, this is what you'll do, which you do unless it's illegal, unethical, or immoral.
Yeah. Well, it goes back to the firing the inspector generals. Just because he creates an executive order that they're fired doesn't necessarily mean that that is legal. They may all be reinstated. A court goes, no, you can't fire them because they have contractual rights. So these executive orders, again, are more the policy and the administration's position that it is. Now, when I go back to Doge, because we're supposed to discuss that in depth, my problem is Elon Musk. He's the head of SpaceX. He's the head of Tesla. Show me where he has the time to actually delve into Doge. In other words, as a lawyer, you'd say, give me an order to show cause why. By the way, I have a legal appointment in a couple of minutes. Order to show cause why he can actually do Doge when he's purportedly the CEO of Tesla and the CEO of SpaceX. Show me where he's going to have the time to delve into this stuff.
He's got another issue he's going to have to deal with, and that is now that it's inside of government rather than outside of government, is he going to be a special government employee? If he's going to be a special government employee, you can't work more than 120 hours without being subject to significant restrictions. And when 120 days, I apologize. And the 120 days, if you work 1 hour, it counts as a day. I'm a special government employee, being a member of the Defense Business Board. Our guideline is 60 days. And so that's going to be a challenge for him. All the more reason why you got to get this administrator, whatever they call it, appointed ASAP, because basically Elon's going to have to operate, I think, more like a chairman of a board, okay, right, rather than a CEO. Right. And that can work. I mean, that can work if you got the right kind of people doing the right thing, but they don't yet.
I'm not concerned about whether Elon has time to do his job. I'm sure that if his merit isn't paid, he'll get fired. But, if he doesn't show merit. But, I think that the biggest concern is the conflict of interest. And especially now that it has become an internal government position, what are we guaranteed that everything he isn't doing isn't benefiting his own companies, which already has? I mean, our government funds have funded all of his satellite work, all of it. And then he sells it back to us. So, I mean, the double-edged sword has bled us more than anything. And now we're giving the man who wields the double-edged sword the power.
Well, so keep in mind this, Kim. This group, whether they're inside of government or outside of government, can't tell anybody to do anything. All they can do is make recommendations that then will have to be considered by the president and the Congress as appropriate, as to whether or not to accept and to move to implement. In addition, it reinforces the need to have adequate transparency over what's going on and what's being recommended, if you will, to try to be able to provide reasonable checks and balances to deal with any potential real or perceived conflicts that might be there. But in the end, they can't instruct anybody to do anything.
Mm-hmm. And with that, we're going to go
with executive order.
Other than cooperate, provide records, provide access to people. I mean, that kind of stuff. Yeah.
Right. Thank you, David. It's been very
Walker and our panel. And please join us on the media show because I'm going to be there for a couple of minutes. I got a legal meeting to attend to. And we'll see you then. Until then, take care.
Take care.